So I'm going to just riff here and welcome to the conversation of the heaven on earth marriage. Basically, the main three parts of this are masculine leadership, sexual polarity, attachment theory, and biblical foundations. So I lied. There's four. Those are the four core pillars of navigating this conversation of the heaven on earth marriage. And I don't have any slides today. I'm just riffing, but I'm excited. So thanks for being here. And I'm going to start with acknowledging where the term the heaven on earth marriage came from, because I just finished Inside the Millionaire Man Cave Network. There's a guy named Benji Alexander, this big, bright Kiwi man who's been a pastor for 11 years or something. And it was through his coursework that I did with him that I just fell in love with this term, the heaven on earth marriage. And it came about through basically his process with his wife of getting unstuck from what they called the trouble pattern of the narcissistic husband and the depressed wife, and unlocking their way through it. So I borrowed that term, the heaven on earth marriage, because who doesn't want that? That to me is that unity of heaven and earth, of masculine, feminine, of basically kingdom and culture and how they can fit together. That's why I named this meeting Kingdom Culture, which I also love for the paradox of that polarity. I've heard it once said that men are the kingdom and women are the weather. And I just loved that. That made perfect sense to me because it takes that kind of orientation to me to find the best of both uh, heaven and earth, and the unity of men and women, and really creating safety. So I'm going to start by talking about attachment theory and what it is, where it began. And then I'm going to round the corner, and then we're going to come into heaven on earth marriage, which is also the secure marriage, the place of security and that orientation with God as the three braided strand that is unbreakable in a marriage. And to give you a little context, I've been married 16 years. And before that, I went through a divorce. So I know the trouble of that and made all the mistakes. And I still make a lot of mistakes and go through highs and lows. So I'm a player coach in this conversation. And I've guided many men and couples through the troubles and traumas that get in the way of unlocking that healthy marriage, that healthy attachment. So what attachment theory, you're probably already familiar with the two main types of attachment styles, avoidant and anxious. But where does this frame even come from? It came from a experiment called The Strange Situation, where a whole bunch of small children were put in a room and they tracked and analyzed their reactions when their mother left the room and they were with a stranger. And then some time went by and then their mother came back. And there's patterns that emerged with how that child would react to that attachment figure and the process of coming and going and coming, which is ultimately what relationships are about, boiled down to their most finite component. It is the relationship between self and other. And obviously, the mother becomes the first figure because we take on life through her body, through the womb. And it's our first relationship of the beloved is between ourselves and our parents. There's a trinity there. The mother, the father, even though he's more distant because he's not the heartbeat you hear, he's there. He's in the seed. So in men's coaching, we talk about four masculine archetypes: the warrior, the king, the magician, and the lover. But it's the lover that's the one that's the one connected to the conversation of attachment and the relationship between self and other. So that's why it's significant and why this is what brings up all the trouble and the most intimate witness to your own growth and evolution is your spouse. And so the modern conversation of attachment theory is like, well, I'm probably the anxious one or I'm the avoidant one. The avoidant one is the one who will stonewall and avoid because the big feelings of whatever's coming up are so scary that they'd rather put up a wall to stay safe and just stonewall. Uh, and the anxious one is the one who's always looking for affirmation, looking for connection from that other, looking for validation through the connection, looking for safety. And it's coming from an insecure place. Both avoidant and anxious are insecure patterns. And they're also the dance of how most relationships are. I think perhaps they're all in some expression of those two poles. Um, and this is the heart of the work is tracking those patterns in yourself and identifying which pattern is more yours, whether you're more the avoidant one who would rather shut down, or you're more the anxious one who's initiating connection and having it not always consistently be there. And the truth is these roles also oscillate. We can move between them. The third attachment style that's significant and noteworthy is called disorganized. And disorganized attachment is more problematic. It's more related to trauma, and it comes from a little person having a parent figure who is at the same time a source of security and life and nourishment, obviously, because they're a parent, they need the child needs them. There's a dependency, but at the same time, they're a source of fear and scariness. So that pattern gets taken into the nervous system of the child that, oh, the one who I need the most is also one I am sometimes scared of. And that's a disorganized attachment style. And most people leave that one out of the conversation because nobody wants to look at the trouble of actually grappling with what it means. It's the push-pull. It's in its most extreme expression, the disorganized attachment is the one who says, I hate you, don't leave me. It's like the push-pull in any relationship. There's a disorganized orientation that isn't secure, isn't settled. And now let's round the corner and talk about secure attachment. This is the heaven on earth promise of feeling so safe, so secure in the marriage, in the relationship, that you're free. You feel free through the connection to be at home, to be yourself, to feel connected, grounded, deserving of love, worthiness. Yeah, and belonging. So connection, belonging, and connection, belonging, and worthiness of connection and safety. That's secure attachment. It sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? Because all relationships have tension in them. They all have this dance of eros, the dance of coming together and moving apart and finding how to make it work. I like to say that the marriage, the dyad of the marriage, is the most smallest unit of the village, and it's where we encounter our closest witness in our own evolution and development. So maybe secure attachment isn't possible, but I'm here to say it is. And I was drawing up the short form handwriting for my notes for today, and I wrote the heaven on earth marriage, and I wrote it out HOE, heaven on earth, the whole marriage. So what exactly even is that? This training, of course, is more designed for husbands, what I like to call the warrior husband on the path. This is about leadership. This is about creating safety on all levels, uh, physical, mental, spiritual, financial, at all levels. The heaven on earth marriage, to borrow Benji Alexander's definition, is the one where both people get what they want, when they want it, the way they like it, without manipulation or control. Both people get what they want, when they want it, how they like it, without manipulation or control. And so I love this definition. And to me, the deepest uh, part is the without manipulation or control, because that enters the territory of the surrender. The deeply surrendered husband is given his authority to lead and serve his marriage because he is submitted to God, and because he is surrendered to God in becoming who he was born to be across all of those vectors: body, being, balance, and business. And balance being the place where the relationships matter, the wife and the children. Uh, most men have three families that they need to consider. The first one is their family of origin and the unfinished business there. The second one is the family he creates with his wife and the family that flows from them. That's the second family that matters. And the third family that matters and is his chosen brotherhood, the place where he can go to sharpen himself, his initiation cave with other men on the path who are going to create a frame for him to sharpen his edge, his leadership capacity. And most modern men are missing the third. They're missing the third family, and it shows. And that's what this conversation is about. It's about inviting men into that commitment, because we're living basically in a time of inversion. We're living in a time where for the last 50 years, I don't know how long back we want to track it, the inversion has been working to bring women uh, into a role that takes away the capacity for the heaven on earth marriage to actually flourish. And at the same time, those same forces have been taking men out of their natural, instinctual, primal leadership and sedating men with video games, with social media, with porn, and with a constant barrage of messaging that shames and inverts the natural order that protects the family. So that's where we get both into the flow of sexual polarity and into the biblical foundations of headship. I heard a couple great a couple great metaphors for headship, because there's a lot of pushback around that idea of masculine leadership right now in the world as we see it. And really, the biblical order is about leadership from men that actually creates a safe container and walks the perimeter around the family. And to me, there's nothing more natural than that, so that mothers feel safe to parent and children feel safe, and that man carries the burden of creating that safety. Isn't that the very definition and purpose of what masculinity is to create safety? When you know you're covered by the Father, you know that you're safe. When you know you belong with the Father, you know you have the armor of God on and you're bulletproof. Um, so this is some of the gospel stuff of headship. And I heard that someone say that the biggest enemy to modern families, that is the downfall of so many marriages, is the two-headed monster. And the two-headed monster is when there's two heads that are butting heads, and that natural sexual polarity where the alpha and omega can dance between a man and a woman gets interrupted if both are trying to create that masculine frame, and then they're going to butt heads. It's the same as having two steering wheels on a car and two sets of gas pedals and brakes. How is a car supposed to drive if there's two drivers? God made that car with one steering wheel, and and that's how it works so that it's safe and it's designed that way. Um, so the real call to action here is about not just men and relationships, because a lot of the advice out there is off the mark. A lot of the advice out there in the conversation of marriage and relationships is about becoming a better communicator. And even right now, I'm going into the territory of ideology. And ideology and getting into concepts is never the place where the real solutions live. It's fine to go off there and study in intentional ways, but boots on the ground, the actual relationship lives in embodied presence and embodied influence. So I never encourage men or the couples I work with to start debating feminism or patriarchy or biblical stuff. It's not made to create solutions. Those are places for academic study. And you can do that if you want to. But here's the thing, because of the modern inversion that has created a lot of masculinized femininity and feminized masculinity, what we're seeing is a lot of unhappy people, a lot of couples who don't know why it's not working, uh, a lot of quiet desperation from a lot of men who know there's something wrong but don't quite know how to put their finger on it about why their marriage has drifted. In in Napoleon Hill's book, Outwit the Devil, he defines the devil as one pattern that affects the hearts and minds of men. And that one pattern has a name. He calls it drift. That drift from purpose, that drift from God's purpose for your life. And that drift is part of the enemy's attack on men. And that's why in my book I wrote Alive on Purpose, which circles back to knowing that when a man knows his purpose first and puts his purpose first in his life, everything else good will follow. Everything else good falls into order when he just orients that way, when he obeys basically not only his purpose, but surrenders to God's purpose for his life. So he knows who he is, he knows where he's going, and he knows what he has to do, and he's willing to continue to take committed action in that direction. That's the great move, and it requires unlocking that voice of God within and obeying it. So once we enter that conversation and we start to correct the imbalances, there will be a lot of collision. There will be sacred collision between men and women. And there's two main patterns I see in men inside of this conversation of making marriage work and attachment and relational emotional alchemy. And the one is the mama's boy pattern. And that's when the man defaults into becoming like a son to his wife. And she takes on a mothering role for him, and it's not going to work. It's not going to last, and it's bad. Uh, and that comes from maybe a mother wound or father wound, and we'll get into that. But that's the one pattern, the mama's boy. If he shuts down and he stops relating with his wife like an equal, like a man, and he starts acting out of the wound, looking for validation, looking to do things to please her and put her on a pedestal rather than orient to God's calling on his life. There's a terrible saying, happy wife, happy life. And that leads to a lot of trouble. And I've replaced it with happy man, God's plan. When I'm surrendering my heart to God's plan every day, then everything else follows. If we want to get biblical and put on a biblical story to frame it, I like to think about the Adam and Eve story, that in that story, God gave Adam work before he gave him a wife. So you must orient as a husband first and foremost to your work, because what it does is it puts an anchor in the ground, and then you're holding sacred ground. You're holding confidently ground so that your wife feels safe. Maybe she'll wanna be your purpose. She'll want to be your number one. But the truth is, if you put her on that pedestal, you become untrustworthy. So putting your stake in the ground, standing strong ground for her, creates a place where she can come to you and soften. And you can lead by setting the tone and setting a frame that is safe for her to come into. As husbands, our wives don't always hear the words we say. They hear the tone we say it in. Is that not true? So it's all about your presence, and the great pull that pulls a husband into is the tension between presence and provision. How can I be present while I'm providing with the family, with the wife, and how do I make it work? So I'm going to point to the other big villain, which is the monster. There's the mama's boy and the monster. And the monster is the one who will turn into the Incredible Hulk. And when he gets too pent up with his emotions that get too repressed, then it explodes out the side in a passive aggressive way or in an angry way, and then fights happen. Here's the thing about fighting in marriage is it's never you fighting each other. It's actually demonic possession. It's actually the enemy attacking your union. The enemy's attacking your love. So when you think that the fight's between you and her, or the argument, but really it's about exhaustion or scarcity or stress. And those are agreement fields that the enemy enters your marriage through. Criticism, accusation, the spirit of lack, the spirit of lostness, numbing out, avoiding, escaping. So those are the two poles for the warrior husband: is the mama's boy trap and the monster on the other side. The remedy is the man of God who walks down the middle, and he orients with that authority, backbone, heart, and balls in his uprightness to create the frame. And here's the interesting data piece. The the data shows that if a husband and wife default to a relationship pattern where he turns more into mama's boy and she mothers him as the main signature of their relational pattern, that is likely to result in a failed relationship. But if you look at it the other way, where if the man that takes on a role of masculine leadership, which at times looks a little bit like fathering his own wife, like protecting and providing for her, so she feels safe. And if he's more in a pattern of fathering her, the marriage is more likely to happen. And that's the biblical foundation of headship, of servant leadership, of creating safety of the masculine. So that's that. But then we get into the trouble of how do you keep love alive and not turn into depolarized roommates inside of the marriage. And that's because the paradox of desire is that you cannot want something you already have. You cannot want something you already have. So that's why desire can fizzle out or can get turned into a swampland of confusion. Restoring desire, because intimacy and desire are not the same thing. Intimacy is seeing into someone, them seeing into you, and orienting to the truth. Too much of that communication can actually flatten desire, because desire is a primal and embodied thing that grows and strengthens with polarity. So keeping love alive is an intentional practice. For the men in my practice, I require them to enact the protocol of the Date Your Wife protocol, which is a weekly date, non-negotiable, with your wife, where you set the date up, you lead, you take her somewhere, you do something with her. And the focus is not on housekeeping or the laundry list of things to care for, but the focus is simply on enjoying each other. And when you install that protocol, things change. I get more into that with my clients and inside the brotherhood. So this call is ultimately an invitation for men and women who are married and are wanting to make that marriage work and flower and become its potential, to join me in a 12-week coaching commitment. I work with men inside of the fellowship, the brotherhood, and I also work with couples. So those are two different ways to work with me, that you can reach out to me and direct message me to have a conversation about. But one thing I want to say about the recipe and the formula for making marriage work is there's also this tension between feelings and destiny. They say feelings are like chemistry. It's adolescent. There's an adolescent nature to feelings. And it's important to have them, to let them move, but we can't be led by them. Destiny says that what God has brought together, let no man separate. And that if God has brought you and your spouse together to create that family, then your purpose together is to grapple with that purpose and fulfill the mission of that marriage. And we've all made mistakes. I've been through a divorce, so I know it's not easy. But what I do is I help couples stay with the trouble and lock in to learning the lessons that relationship is designed to resolve and designed to complete, which is usually related to the family of origin and some unfinished business of childhood. So that's the long and the short of it. And it's the full curriculum of the heaven on earth marriage based on attachment theory, really knowing who you are and where you come from in terms of your family of origin, your father work, your mother work, and staying in a place of grace and favor as a parent and as a marriage on a mission. I believe each marriage has a mission. And when you unlock that mission, you can overturn the lies that have been attacking the marriage. The lies come from the father of lies, the enemy, and the truth is that your love can heal you when you surrender inside of it and go with, in a convicted way, the transformation that your marriage is asking of you. So thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. Send me a direct message if you want to have a conversation. Bye for now.